so you did Photo Jojo. You ended up selling it, I believe. Took some time off, and then you got into fiction writing. How did that kind of evolve?
Yeah, so after Photo Jojo, I took some time off and I like traveled and
Yeah,
advised some startups and coached and did a bunch of different things and wanted to find my way to something different just because I
yeah.
had the opportunity. And I grew up reading science fiction. It's what got me excited to go out and invent things, to make things. And I
Mhm.
hear that story from so many people, so many
Yeah,
of my peers.
yeah.
And it kind of saddened me to see the state of science fiction today.
Hmm.
It's just very dystopian. Um,
Oh,
and I think that I mean, it's still fun to read, but it's kind of dark.
yeah. There's a
And
theme. Yeah, it tends to be pretty consistent. Yeah, it's a good point.
yeah, and you can't invent stuff that you can't imagine. I grew up reading science fiction that was some of it was dystopian, but some of it was very utopian, some of it is balanced.
Yeah.
And if you can only read books and read stories about how dark the future is going to be, how bad technology is going to make things for us, it's hard to imagine technology making the world better.
Hmm.
And that's dangerous, I think, because
Yeah.
we read this stuff, we grow up on it, and then we try to invent what we saw, good or bad. So I wanted to at least try to add another voice to that chorus, one that was less ominous and more
Yeah.
utopian, more
Yeah.
balanced. So
Yeah.
that's why I got into science fiction.
Wow. And how did you go about learning to write? I mean, not that you didn't know, obviously you knew how to write, but you know what I mean? How did you learn to
No,
write
yeah,
fiction? How did you learn yeah, like what was that
yeah.
process like?
I was learning how to write. I felt like I was like, all the way at the bottom again. I was used to being good at what I did, and here I was like terrible at what I did.
Yeah.
Trying to climb this rope.
Hmm.
I read a lot of stuff. I wrote a lot. I read Stephen King's on writing and all the writing books that everyone tells you to read, and they all just say
Yeah.
like just write every day, write every day. So I just wrote every day.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest lever for me was finding other people who were at a similar stage trying to become science fiction writers. So I eventually found my way to a group that our friend Sahil started. That's where I met my co-founder, James Yu, who's my co-founder for Sudowrite. He was also someone who had started some tech startups and then decided to write science fiction. But
Yeah.
having that like weekly cadence of meetings where we were bringing work, critiquing work, and feeling accountable to each other to create every week was
Mm.
absolutely essential.
That's so cool. And then was that local or was that distributed?
All was distributed. We were all in different places, so it didn't really change after the pandemic started.
And is it like you're meeting on Zoom or are you sending, I got it. That's so
Yeah, we send stories to each other. It's been on hiatus for a while. Both James and I have gotten so busy with Sudowrite, so we haven't been
yeah.
going. But
Yeah.
we would send stories to each other a few days before the meeting. We would all individually read the stories and write up some critique, and then we'd have like a 1 hour meeting where we were going through each story and giving critique.
That's super cool. It seems really valuable.
Yeah.
So I get that brings us to Suda. I mean, so you're getting into fiction writing and you're doing all this stuff. What was it that got your gears moving around creating something like Sudo?
Yeah, so GPT-3 came out last year.
Yeah.
GPT-3, for those who don't know it, it's just basically one of the largest text transformer models that's been released. It was created by this organization, OpenAI, and it inhaled the entire internet, this entirely, the large corpus of books, all this other written material. And its purpose is to basically take something and try to predict what comes next. So if you give it a paragraph, give it a page, whatever, it'll try to predict the next few sentences, paragraphs, page, whatever. So we saw this, and just because I think both James and I had seen former versions of this, and they were kind of like fun toys, but they weren't really useful. But there are folks like Robin Sloan and other authors who'd played with this stuff. Ken Liu, I think, had played with it too, as a way to accelerate their writing and just kind of deviate from their normal ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And GPT-3 was orders of magnitude larger. So it got us very excited. And I think James was playing with it first. He just started to like build this little web app that was a text editor and would predict what you were going to write before you wrote it. And I got excited seeing that. I started playing around with it too. And I think very quickly we saw that this wasn't a toy anymore. This could actually spark your creativity and actually enhance creativity in a way that wasn't possible for this medium before. I think we forget, if we're not writers, like as a designer and as a photographer, I'm so used to using all these digital tools to enable my workflow and take all the drudgery out of, like, I don't go to the darkroom when I develop photos. It's like instantly there and I can edit them very easily, but you can't do that with writing. And so as a writer, you're like just really painstakingly working word by word to make things better.
Hmm.
And I think there's a future coming pretty quickly where you don't have to do that, that you can have some pretty powerful assistance in those things.
Yeah. So you started tinkering around, and now pseudo. I mean, I think it's kind of hard maybe for folks to visualize, especially like over audio or whatever it is. But walk through like how do you use pseudo, and what does it help you do?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things it can do. One of the things it helps with is writer's block. So if you're working on a story, or it can be nonfiction too, working on an essay or whatever, and you're kind of stuck with where to go next, you can hit this button called Wormhole, and Wormhole will actually write what comes next in 4 different directions. You can hit it again, you'll get 4 more. And it's in your own style, it's in your own kind of voice. If there's any narrative arcs or character arcs you've started, it'll try to follow those. And it does a remarkable job. It's astonishing how good this is. It doesn't seem like a computer should be able to do this. And it's a great way to spark what comes next. You may use the copy that comes out. You may just use it as inspiration for where you want to go with the story next. So it can do that with prose. You can also do that with an outline. Maybe you've like sketched out the beginning of something and you want some ideas for where you can go next. It can help you with that. Maybe you struggle with description. A lot of writers say that they need help with like describing a scene or a character or whatever.
Yeah.
You can just highlight that thing, hit describe, and it'll give you ideas for how to describe that person, place, or thing using each of your 5 senses. So what it smells like, what it looks like, what it feels like, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it does a ton of other stuff. It can actually like take a summary of a scene you've written and expand it out into a first draft. It can give you feedback on a story. We're launching this new feature called Brainstorm, which I'm really excited about, where you can very freeform just brainstorm different ideas for anything, and it's a very fun kind of playful way to come up with ideas.
Yeah, that's so cool. How I mean, I would imagine that you're pretty heavily, if not now, it sounds like you've gotten pretty busy, but at least for a good chunk of time, you were actively using this to help you write. What have you found about the experience of kind of having this sidekick with you? Like kind of where do you end and it begins? And it seems like it's a very collaborative kind of process, I would think, right?
Yeah, it's not lonely. I think that's one of the big things you start to feel, especially going from like kind of building companies and building tech. It's so collaborative. And when you're writing, you're really just sitting by yourself at the keyboard. If you're stuck, you're banging your head against the desk, wishing you were not stuck. And I think one of the coolest things about this is that it feels like there's someone else in the room that you can turn to and ask for help. And that person may not have the idea, but they're going to help you get unstuck and help you get moving. So that's the biggest thing. It helps you stay in flow, and it feels like you're not alone in the process.